Okay, thanks, Derek. And Hama, thank you again for all your help. So what I would also recommend is that just so that Hama has a record of your interests, etc., is a good opportunity is to kind of put stuff in the chat, even if it's not directly related to what I am sort of addressing at the time. But if it's something you comes to mind that you'd like to, then put it in the chat, because Hama will at least be able to see it. And one of the things that we're always trying to gauge is to get a true reading on where people are at and what kind of information they actually would need in order to help them in their next steps. So, some of this will miss people. It'll be pertinent to some, not so pertinent to others. I try to create a sort of a broad scope along with my philosophy of what we as musicians really need to be doing in this time. And so anyway, let's jump right into it. So this particular presentation is about revenue generation. I call it getting paid and getting grants. I'm going to focus a little bit on, the grant discussion, but I'm going to go through some of just to recap some of the revenue streams that are available to us as musicians, artists, songwriters, creators, and so on. So, of course, we all know about perhaps the vehicle that has defined our industry for generations, which is live performances. There's opportunities for people who play cover tunes and people who play originals. And in my day, when I say my day, I'm saying 30, 35 years, 20 years, even up to 10 years ago. There tended to be some very strict departures between people who were kind of cover band players, cover tunes, including those bands that were sort of dedicated to particular groups and so on. So, when I started living north of Toronto, I realized that, there's quite a thriving practice of folks who play in the Who cover bands or, Earth, Wind and Fire cover bands and that sort of thing. And that really was a great opportunity for revenue generation for a lot of people who are musicians and so on, to travel and play that. Some of the benefits of that, there's a larger number of agents that are actually booking cover bands, I think, than are booking original music. Most of the gigs are well paying. They're in restaurants, bars, corporate gigs, private parties, weddings. I have friends now who, when we started off together, we all played, original music and that sort of thing. And I have certainly a few friends who have never turned back once they started playing the wedding circuit, because, in terms of what they needed to get out of it, it gave them a good living. The revenue opportunities are immense. Okay, and of course, there's a greater availability of performances and so on. And then there are the folks who do live performances, but are in original music business. Their opportunities can range from festivals to bars. One thing about the original scene is that it tends to attract other creatives as well. By other creatives, I mean folks who are themselves in creative processes, like dancers, a lot of multimedia artists, and so on. So tend to be attracted to original music. There's also opportunities for merchandising, because if you develop a fan base, there are always opportunities to merchandise products. Everyone should be thinking now of developing their brand. We covered some of this in some of the past sessions, so I'm not going to go in detail into that, but everyone should be looking at developing their brand and then looking at the opportunities for merchandising along with when they do live performances of original material and so on. There's always, of course, the opportunity for royalties, which we already covered previously, but it is my belief that a lot of my colleagues are leaving too much money on the table, so to speak. And so we really need to get on top of the opportunity for royalties, etc., and make sure that we register with the organizations that can correct these royalties on our behalf. It's also an opportunity with live performances to build a loyal fan base, to have people who are familiar with our music, etc., and may become fans, right? Okay, so also now live performances. One of the things that, and this will this will fluctuate depending on what the COVID rules happen to be, because it looks like we're in this live performance hold for an extended period of time, given what the Premier has said in the last couple of days. I know many of us expected to be getting back out to be playing this summer. It certainly doesn't look that way, but one of the things that we may be able to do are house concerts, because house concerts will allow sometimes for us to be able to maintain the protocol. So, for example, let's say the protocol for a gathering in a house went up to 20 or something like that. Well, that's enough people to actually have a live concert, and so it's a limited capacity in terms of audience, but there's an opportunity to create an intimate, a premier quality experience where I've been to some great live house concerts where the ability to interact with the artist, and have a lot of a personal touch. Artists can talk more about their upbringing, their past that got them there, all of the things that really endear artists to audiences. A lot of it can be done really well in a house concert. As I said, there's a great revenue opportunity because ticket prices can be really high. People will pay up to, $100 in some cases. I've seen ticket prices up to $150 to go to a house concert. The idea here is that if you're doing house concerts, that you consider that, people are going to pay a premium ticket for it. They're going to pay a premium price for it, I should say. And it's important to give them a quality experience. What else can I do other than just the performance of the music? Perhaps there are other things that I can do. There, some merchandising and so on that I can package along with the music that they get for the cost of that premium ticket that they're going to pay for the house concert, right? The overhead is limited. It's not like playing a live gig in an open venue, because you only need a small PA, for example. There's lots of merchandise opportunities, opportunity to promote well. There are informal booking channels for house concerts, which in one way is great because it provides a lot of flexibility. People can build a network of folks who are willing to facilitate the house concerts. It expands your reach. The other thing is there's the opportunity for additional revenue because even house concerts can be broadcast live from your studio or living room, etc., or wherever they are. And then you can earn additional funds from live streaming, right? So now, wanted to touch on in terms of the creation of product that will generate revenue. So CD sales are definitely declining. There's no question about that. But it doesn't mean that they're dead altogether. And because we exist in a marketplace where there are people of many generations, we can't assume, for example, that everyone who is going to like our music or who's interested will be looking to get it online, even though there's no doubt that online streaming opportunities and so on represent almost 70% of business done in the Canadian music industry. But still, especially those genres like blues, for example, that have been around for quite some time, a lot of the blues fans want to have a CD, or some of them want to have a record. There's an opportunity to create a cheaply, it's cheap to produce, but there's an opportunity to create some product. The cover can can be done in some really interesting and intricate ways that gives people an added value for having that vinyl product. It's a great keepsake. It can be merchandised anywhere. There's often going to be resale value for some of the vinyl products that people create that are unique. So there's still opportunities there. CDs can be signed as well as vinyl records. They can be signed for fans. So fans have an opportunity to collect something that has actually been signed by the artist. Whatever. There's still CD Baby still will do disc duplication, distribution. CDs can be sold online fairly easily and without paying huge amounts of commissions. Vinyl sales are doing well because they're collector souvenirs. And as I said, the artwork provides some great opportunities. All of this, CDs, vinyl products, etc., can still be marketed online as well, right? So, and once the distribution network is put in place, then there's some significant opportunities can come if people are serving their niche market with vinyls and CDs. Of course, the big fish in the ocean nowadays are digital downloads and streaming. Digital downloads, are actually decreasing in sales. And as streaming platforms become more and more popular, website, you can set up your own website to sell digital downloads. The good thing about the digital downloads and the streaming is that because it's operating within that, within the computer realm, a ton of information can be had about the folks who are supporting you, who is indicating interest. You can have market analysis that you could not necessarily have before. You can engage fans in quite a unique way and also know so much about them so that you can look at where the trends are and who is interested in your music. And then talk about either one, there's a market that I'm missing, how do I target them? And also, if these are the folks that seem to be liking my music and interested, etc., how can I get more of them on board, right? So there's definitely great opportunities for collecting fan information, etc. Also, those people can be communicated with regards to new releases, merchandising opportunities. All of these are revenue generating possibilities, right? You can sell digital downloads commission free. Artists can keep a majority of the revenues if the music is sold on their own website, because you're not paying out any portion of your revenue to another party. Some platforms actually facilitate artists being able to build their own websites and things like that. And then with regards to streaming, it provides an opportunity for performers, musicians, songwriters, etc., to generate income. Now, streaming tends to be the revenue generation characteristic or profile is small money. It doesn't cost a lot to stream an individual tune. So, but however, it creates an opportunity for immense volume, which is why streaming has taken off the way it has. And it is in that generation of an increasing and expanding audience where the revenue generation possibilities are, and the fact that some significant revenue can be gained from streaming. Okay, it also provides opportunities for promotion, for people to discover your music just by genre, who you may not have had as a fan before. It allows for marketing, promotion, booking gigs, right? So people, traction gained from streaming can be turned into actual live gig opportunities when we get back out there, right? We're not there yet. Music can be distributed to streaming companies for eventual inclusion on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and the list is growing. And by the way, I'm not sort of trying to target any one or recommend any of these companies, I think that the marketplace is so volatile in terms of what's available that people really just need to keep abreast of them, because they're shifting all the time. The competition is high. They're all offering different things at different times. And so I think you really just have to get in there and try to and promise yourself to always be keeping abreast of what's available, who's offering what's the best opportunity for you as an artist, and so on. Get your music on playlists. Okay, we're leaving too much money that could be coming to Canadian musicians, etc. We're leaving too much of it, without us channeling those funds to us. There's a lot of opportunity. The world is our marketplace now for Canadian music. Okay, there's also an opportunity for revenue through digital merchandising and subscription. Okay, so digital merchandising such as videos, video lessons, sheet music, lyric books. A lot of the platforms allow you to track sales and inventory as you're online. The computer is an amazing tool in this regard, and so there's a lot of opportunity there for simply marketing your merchandise. There's platforms that facilitate online setup. Subscriptions, where if you have fans, subscriptions are where they might pay a monthly fee, a quarterly fee, even an annual fee for access to the artist content. So, for example, people who already have a couple of recordings that they've done, for example, may be able to list their discography, give fans the opportunity to interact with it, download it whenever they need it, et cetera, et cetera. And for that, they're going to pay a monthly fee or a quarterly fee, et cetera, to be one of your fans, right? It also gives an opportunity to things like, new releases. So even artists who don't yet have any product, starting to create a fan base. If you live in an area where locally people have been engaging you, et cetera, I hope that you've been collecting, email addresses, all that kind of stuff, ways that you can communicate with the fans. The way that we're going to generate funds now is going to be heavily engagement with fans and continuing that engagement past the live event. Okay, so all of us, when we go out to play a gig, etc., there should be someone who is there taking the names, taking the email addresses, etc., of those people who indicated an interest in our music. Subscriptions can be lucrative because they can gain you a steady income, right? So if you can imagine that, you have a certain amount of people, they're paying a certain amount for the subscription because, especially in this COVID time where, people may not be able to see you at a gig for a while. Well, they can subscribe, right? They can subscribe to your online presence, and they can, you can even use the subscription to give things like house concerts, a private performance. I could see some of the singer guitarists, or singers or singer pianists, or other people playing other instruments. Doesn't really matter, right? That you can present yourself to your fan base, to your audience, for a subscription that they're going to pay monthly, and that allows you to have a stable income over a long period of time, and can continue even when we get back to actual live performances and so on. Okay, it allows the artist to continue to engage the fans and their loyalty. Subscriptions can be sold, of course, commission-free, because the best way is to sell them from your own site, and you can use it to release promo videos that encourage fans to engage. So what I'm trying to get across here is really that we have to start to think outside of the genre that has defined our industry, which is live performance. We love that, of course. We're all hoping to get back to that. But I'm thinking even when we get back to that, many of us need to continue to engage in all these other ways that are possible. We tend to leave it to only people who are doing new music to consider those. And some of the old traditional music, like jazz, like the blues, etc., really needs to engage the revenue generating opportunities that are possible.
Larkin Poe just set up a new platform with, I think, 7 different ways they can join different.
Okay, who did that? Who did
Sorry,
that?
Larkin Poe. It's
Larkin Poe. Yeah, okay.
2 sisters from down the state.
Yeah.
Check their site out. They just
Yeah, I will.
started this weekend, I think.
I will. You know what, Bruce, put it in the chat, just so that other folks can access it too. And you know what, you hit upon a really good thing. There's so much going on. So many people are using it creatively to try and find ways to engage their audience. No two people are necessarily going to have the same mix of these revenue opportunities, but it's good that people understand them and then make a determination as to what your own strategy is going to be. You might say, well, you know what, I'm already I'm already recording fairly regularly, right? So I'm going to go the route of doing this, or I have connections. I've done some music for dance, or I've done some music with this multimedia artist. Well, that's an avenue that I'm already in. How do I maximize that now while extending my abilities to some of these other revenue generating opportunities? We talked a little bit before about in one of the previous sessions about copywriting, performance rights, and all of that. Everyone should be signed up if you are producing music that has the opportunity for performance beyond your bedroom. Everyone should be signed up with a performance rights organization. There's just too much opportunity there that's not being taken, right? Sign up with a performance rights organization because they will collect royalties on your behalf. If you're a songwriter or a publisher, it's a way of ensuring that you get paid for what your music can do and where your music goes, okay? They will collect and distribute the money to the rights holders, which might be yourself. Even if you're hooked up with a record company, whatever that split is between yourself and the label, the performance rights organization, they will do all that. They will say, okay, this is what the deal is. This percent goes to you. This percent goes to the label, etc. Okay, and if you're self-produced, well, you'll have most of that yourself. Okay, I would say have it as a mission to get all your music royalties. And I'm saying this from personal experience. I spent, a lot of my younger life playing some pretty good music, and some of the original bands that I played in. You know what? We had airplay in some places. We never spent enough time looking at the opportunities for revenue that was being generated by our music royalties. Okay, so I'm saying, as an older gray-bearded guy now, my advice to people is really have a look at the opportunities for revenue generation that will come from those royalties, from your publishing, from your digital royalties, and get to understand them, right? Whenever music is played on a non-interactive streaming music service, royalties have to be paid, right? This is like webcasters, cable TV channels, satellite radio. Collect your non-interactive digital royalties by signing up with somebody like Sound Exchange, okay, whose task it is to collect, right? And signing up with Sound Exchange, for example, is free. So there's absolutely less obstacles than ever before with regards to people gaining access to what their music can do and gaining the royalties that are to be benefited from, okay? There are mechanical royalties that are paid to songwriters or rights holders for purchased music. This includes CDs, vinyls, downloads, streams. The payments are sent to the royalty collection societies. They then distribute that out to the music publishers, and or, as I said, in the case of people who don't have a publishing deal, but they're their own publisher, they will gain all those revenues. Sign up with an administrator, somebody who can collect those on your behalf. Some of the companies actually make it pretty easy, like CD Baby. This is just an example. I'm not promoting any one over the other. And then, of course, there's the opportunity for music that you create to be used for, licensing fees, to gain licensing fees from sync. Sync is when your music is used along with a TV show, for example, or in an ad on the radio or something like that. Okay, these are all really great money-making tools. I had a friend of mine who had written back in the day. He said he wrote it and kind of recorded it on a cassette, and that became the theme for one of the comedy television shows in Toronto. He said he's never made as much money from anything else, despite his years of playing, as he had from that single theme that he created for a comedy show that happened to be like. He sent it to them on cassette. They thought it was great. And when he said, okay, now I'll re-record it properly for you, they're like, no. We want it exactly how it is. And that literally, bad sounding in his mind, but that cassette became the theme for a comedy show that ran for quite a long time. He collected enormous royalties from it. So, the idea, what I'm trying to get across is that, we're artists, we're creating our music, etc. anyway, those of us who are committed to it, and let it do what it can do. We just have to be promising that we will be there to foster it, nurture it, and let it do what it can do, and then make sure that we are set up to collect the revenue generation that will come from it, right? This is the key. I should talk a little bit about the idea of having songs placed in TVs and movies. There's a friend of mine from Sheridan. What's his? You know what? Okay, I can't remember his name. I wasn't prepared to give names of companies. But anyway, there's a few people in the business, at least in Toronto, in the business of getting songs placed in TVs and movies. If you have that interest, when you're watching movies and you think to yourself, you know what, I'm hearing what the background music is. I could do that. Okay, maybe, consider doing it, right? And how you might have some of your stuff placed. Okay. Those of us who are in the songwriting and composing business, there's opportunities. Write songs for other musicians, right? I have known some very prolific songwriters who insisted on only writing songs for themselves to perform when they could write for other people. I always remind folks, when I'm talking about this, I always remind folks that, the world knew Bob Marley's music through the performances of Johnny Nash. It wasn't Bob Marley's own songs that became popular first. It was the ones he wrote for Johnny Nash, like Stir It Up and so and so. Okay, it provided a great avenue of revenue, etc., for people who have the capacity to write songs. Right? You can write songs for you to perform, and then write some others for other people as well. Right? So those are also, send some of your songs to some of the artists who in the genre who may be looking for material, etc., etc. Always great opportunities there. Consider composing music for film and television, as I mentioned before, because there's significant revenues in the licensing fees and royalties that can come from that. Licensing your music to advertisers. Even locally placed jingles on the radio or something like that, it's a great start to get music involved with the, that industry that makes quite a bit of cash. And as I said before, composing for visual art, multimedia presentations, composing for dance, collaborating with other artists, composing songs as a corporate tool or to build internal loyalty. Also, artists are often, how would I say? I'm going to say vessels of information. Okay? And anyone who is a vessel of information, especially within a creative forum, has the opportunity to teach, right? So we can generate revenue by teaching our instrument. Okay? There are years when I wasn't necessarily, depending on my circumstance, I wasn't out on the road a lot or something like that. I spend a lot of time teaching because I play an instrument that, there's not a wide knowledge of it. So, people often be like, hey, you know what, we want to get some lessons, or not necessarily that it has to be my instrument, because of, for example, in my case, because of the benefit of the type of music I studied, there are particular capacities that people would hire me to do. They say, look, you know what? We don't like the way our band sounds. We want it to be really sounding a lot tighter. We know that you have a really good understanding of that process. Come and work with us, right? So teaching can extend to other folks. You could teach online. Okay, you could teach your instrument. You could teach your style of what you do. You could teach your technique. It's a great way to supplement your income and also continue to work on your musicianship. You can offer music lessons in person, online, set up and sell video lessons, right, through your teaching website. There's a host of people who, have videos that, you can download for a fee that teaches a variety of things. To be quite honest with you, when I look at some of them, they're not as good as what I know people right here in Toronto can do because of their ability, their technique, et cetera, et cetera. Also, author books, articles, magazines, blogs, other kinds of media. These are all revenue generating opportunities. I don't know if Bill McBurney is on the call today, but I remember that, Bill was expressing, I think 2 sessions ago, that the book that he wrote, Bill McBurney, by the way, is a flautist that lives in Toronto, amazing player, but also a phenomenal improvisation artist. And so he wrote a book about his improvisation techniques. And those of you who were on the call that day will remember he said he made more revenue from that book than from all the jobs and gigs that he's had, right? So there is a tremendous amount of opportunity, right? And even if the book that you do is not necessarily as successful as Bill's book was, it could definitely contribute to your revenue mix, right? So that's the whole idea, to find more and more ways to generate revenue and allow your knowledge, your acumen, your musical and other abilities, your life experience, allow those things to work for you by sharing them with others. The subject of your book, magazine, article could be any music. It could be any aspect of your life that you can competently express, right? Lifestyle, technical issues, the arts, business, creativity, teamwork, listening while playing, right? Are a few topics that you can cover. Out of my knowledge, for example, of ensemble playing, I have built a whole workshop that I do with corporations on team building, because I take some of the same principles of how you play together in an ensemble, right? In a way that means that you have to listen to each other, you have to share the lead, You have to sometimes do that on the drop of a dime. Well, how does all of that work? So I've taken all of those principles that we do when we play together in an ensemble, something that perhaps a lot of musicians take for granted, right? Because they're doing it all their lives. I've taken that and turned it into a team building workshop, right? So just, then there's also monetization that can come from social media, Facebook, Instagram, the songs used in Facebook videos or Instagram stories. Upload the videos that use your music. Because even if it's just playing in the background, that's something that's a revenue stream. You can get paid for that. Okay? Resources for Facebook and Instagram, CD Baby, for example, social video monetization, music used in a YouTube video that's running ads, you can get paid for that. YouTube pays part of that ad money to the right holder of the song. Digital distributors collect that money from YouTube, and then they will pay it out to you. So the idea here that I'm trying to get across is that we need to diversify our streams of revenue. It is just really good business for us as songwriters, creators, musicians, etc. It is just good business practice, and it is perhaps the way in which that we're going to be able to move into and move through the constantly changing environment and be able to mitigate the risk that occurs when we, for example, have built our careers on live performances and they are no longer as viable as they were before, or they may be less viable for a time, right? So we have to diversify our ability to make revenue and make it work for us. All right. I thought today that I would spend a little bit more time on grants, okay? Because in Canada, we do have a system where there are artist grants designed to support artists, and want to make sure that we're able to cover that in a way that can really be helpful to folks. By the way, the Toronto Arts Council grants for creation and recording, the deadline is September the 6th, right? And my aim is that when they get the grant applications on September the 6th, I want them to see a spike in the quality of the applications, and as well, Ontario Arts Council, all of the other opportunities that there are for us to compete for grants, and it is a competition. Okay, so now what are grants in the general scheme of things? Grants are designed to provide support for artists, producers, presenters, participants in the arts ecosystem. The recognition of the significance of the arts to the vibrancy of communities, cities, nations, this is what is wrapped up in the arts grant, right? Now, there's always a cycle of competition for dollars, and this is something that, perhaps artists need to always make sure that they remember. So in other words, arts grants in Canada are not necessarily guaranteed to anybody per se. All governments, there are folks who are saying, hey, you know what, let's reduce the amount of funding to the arts so we can pave the road, or, people who are working as arts advocates and who are working as, in the arts councils, for example, et cetera, they are constantly advocating to get a bigger part of the pie going to the artists and the creatives and the producers and presenters, et cetera, the arts societies and so on. Always. So that's, everybody should know that in the back of their head, that this is the landscape, this is the environment that we're in. Some countries, for example, tie the support for artists to the national budget. So, for example, if you're in France, 1%, I think it is, or 1.5% or something like that, of the French national budget is allocated to artists. And so the well-being of the artists in the country is tied to the well-being of the country. When the country has more money to spend, then the artists get more because they always get a fixed percentage of what that national budget is. That's one way to do it. And, you know, some people in Canada have been pushing for that approach for a long time. It's not what we do, but there's some merit to that. Okay, so now with regards to grant writing. So when you're about to write a grant, right? I'm going to try to be generic, and then we can talk in the discussion about the specificity. But when you're about to write a grant, you know, what are the things that you need to know first? Well, one of the first things you need to understand are the strategic objectives of the granting body. So you're going to apply, let's say, to that Toronto Arts Council grant on September the 6th there. Okay, how many folks have actually looked at the Toronto Arts Council's declaration of their strategic plan for the Toronto Arts Council? What is it, right? What are the objectives of the Toronto Arts Council as a whole? That is extremely important for one to know if one is going to apply for one of the grants that are available. Also, what is the focus of that granting body? What do they say that they're focusing on? Because if they're not focusing on a category of artists, etc., that you fall within, then you may be in a situation where you're not going to prioritize for grants. And so you should know that, right? The other thing is, what are the outcomes or the impacts that are being sought by the granting body? What, for this specific grant that they have, you know, for music creators and recording, what is the outcome that they're looking to influence in the community? That's important to know. The intended outcomes for the program of interest. So the specific program, you have a bunch of music programs, but maybe the one for recording has a specific outcome that they're looking to have. There's an intended outcome. And so one way to look at this is that the granting body is making an investment. And when they make the investment in the community, they have some specific returns that they're looking for. By reviewing the strategic outcomes and so on that they're expecting to have, you will gain a better understanding of what are the actual returns that they're looking to have, right? And those returns are not measured necessarily by each individual artist. Those returns are often, because they're looking at it with some oversight. So those returns are going to be measured by, you know, how many artists, right, were able to produce recordings. Because let's say we had a program that were aimed at first-time artists recording. And then of that, those artists that were able to have a first-time recording, what was the success of that? What was the quality? You know, and so and so. These are the ways in which the granting bodies will look at what the return on their investment is. You know, are they having the success? So it's important as artists, when we go to apply for the funds, to understand what their success factors are. Okay, because often the grants themselves and the assessment of the grants are going to be influenced by that. Review some artists that were funded by the program that you're interested in. Have a look at the list. Most funding agencies will have a list of, you know, artists in the past, or, you know, people in the past who've gotten the same funding that you're applying for. Go down the list and see. It gives you an idea of the types of things that are being funded, right? What the trends are. Because sometimes that may not be readily understood from reading the literature. But when you go and you look at it and say, well, oh, I see. Okay, these are the things they funded. They like this, they funded that. Okay, good. Now I have a better understanding. In addition to the literature, I have an understanding of who I can think of, the kind of art that was funded, and so and so. And in some cases, if you have an opportunity to read successful grants, then do that too. Also, you want to know what the maximum grant allocation that's possible for the program you're looking at. What's the maximum grant allocation possible? Because like anything else, you have to, in terms of the use of your own resources, you have to know what you are anticipating in terms of revenue, and how does that balance out with the time that you will need to put into the project to do this, to have those results. Those must balance up, right? In other words, don't work for a year on a project to have this massive project when the grant allocation might be $3,000. You see, you have to look at that. Also, look in advance. What are the reporting requirements? So that when I'm actually doing my application, when I'm putting my project together, I know in my head, even previously, at the end of this, what am I going to have to report? Because if I know and I understand right from the beginning what I'm going to have to report, then I will collect it as I am going along the way and not be scrambling at the end to somehow pull all that information together, right? I will take into consideration. They're expecting me to report on this, this, and this. So therefore, I'm going to make sure that I collect that data or whatever it might be as I go along. Okay, so now you got the preliminary information. You've thought about all those things that that I described. Okay, one, the deadline for most grants are unforgiving. Don't miss it. And I'm telling you this from firsthand experience, okay? Don't do all that work and then for some reason mess up what the deadline was, because you will find that in order for fairness to exist, the deadlines are unforgiving, sorry. Most granting agencies can't allow any more time, even if you are a minute late. If the deadline is 5 o'clock on a specific date, don't submit it at 5 or 2 because they won't accept it. Sometimes it's a mail-in process and they will say it has to be stamped. It has to be postal stamped by a certain date and time and so on. Please, prepare well in advance so that you're not scrambling at the end. Read, reread, seek help in order to ensure a clear understanding of the intentions in investing from the funder now, right? From the organization that is providing the funding allocation. Read their materials. Read it over and over and over again. If you don't understand any of it, seek help, call them up. Most funding agencies are just wanting to fund the best people, so they will give you all the information. They will answer your questions. Okay? Guidelines. They all funding, I've never seen a funding application that didn't have guidelines. They lay out the guidelines in detail. So it's important that you read them prior to considering the application. Make sure that you're eligible, right? Make sure that the timelines that are articulated that you can meet, right? Sometimes, for example, you have in mind a project that you want to do at a certain date. And sometimes the guidelines will tell you that, for example, events that will take place before such and such a date are not eligible under the guidelines for that particular program. The amount of times I've seen people, right, who send in the application, and in the application it speaks to several of their events that are part of the project that are outside of the timeline that the guidelines clearly state will be eligible, right? So make sure you read the guidelines properly. If you're an inexperienced applicant, as I said, contact the funder, seek clarity, ask questions. Give yourself adequate time. No last minute, right? Begin your research, collection of support materials 3 months prior to deadline. And here's another part. The artist profile, the artistic direction, program objectives that you intend to achieve, your intended outcomes. Okay, a lot of time your grants will hinge on this and the budget. So practice how to write it. Okay, practice it. Practice writing your artist profile, because what will happen is as you apply for more and more grants and you've written that artist profile a number of times, you become, you learn how to do it in a very succinct manner and to be very effective in terms of how you describe yourself, how you describe your art, how you describe the project that you want to do. Okay? All grants will require some form of that. And the project outcomes must at least partially fulfill the funder's goals for the program. Remember, we talked earlier about that each funder has a specific set of goals that they want to achieve. Well, look at it this way. If somebody's investing their money and they have some goals that they would, like to see achieved with regards to the program, if what you're applying for doesn't advance their goals, why would they give you the money? You're going to end up being in a situation where you're not the prime candidate. Okay, so always look at the grants that you're applying for. We call it being a fit, right? Make sure that you're a fit. Okay, can everybody hear me now? Hello? Hama, can you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you.
You're good.
Okay, good. Thank you. My phone just decided to mute me for no reason. Okay. All right. So, as I was saying, make sure you practice how to write that profile. Practice, just even now when you're not in grant writing mode, practice. If you come across one that you think, yeah, this really kind of speaks about me and what I do in a really succinct and effective manner, keep it, save it, right? Because later on, when you're going to apply for grants, you can massage it at that time, and you won't be starting the writing of the description of what you're doing or your artist profile. You won't be writing this. You won't be doing that from scratch, from nothing. Okay. Detail quite clearly the steps in accomplishing your project. This is something you can do even in advance. One of the first things you should do when you look at a grant opportunity and you're interested in a particular program, you've got your project in mind. Okay, start to at first write out a skeleton of the steps it's going to take you to get there, and then start to add detail to that. Okay, now sometimes you'll have all that detail, but you won't be able to put all of that in the grant, because if it's one of those grants that has a word number limit, you may have to then shrink that a bit. But the thing is, if you go through that process for yourself of detailing all of the steps and all of the pieces, what happens is that it. You've got it top of mind, and when you go now to articulate it in the application, you know what you're going to put. You see what I'm saying? You know how to shrink it, etc., because you're not leaving out any detail, really, because you have it all in your mind. You've actually documented it, and it's sitting there in front of you, right? So now, with regards to support materials, treat the support materials with extreme importance. They are also a significant part of the evidence for the jury. Begin the collection and preparation of support materials as early as possible, so you're not scrambling at the end. Make sure that the support materials are in the format that will be supported by the jury. So for example, they may say, look, if you're submitting a musical sample, it has to be in an MP3 or MP4 format, etc., etc. Then make sure that you begin preparing those materials and putting them in that format. Don't send samples that are not what they have indicated they need in terms of the format, right? The amount of times I've sat on juries, and I'm pretty sure that even though we try to be as objective as possible and we say, okay, well, you know, maybe they made a mistake with the format, et cetera, by the time the people who are assisting the juries to hear the material, by the time they, you know, run around trying to find a way to solve it for one individual, it doesn't bode well for that individual in terms of now the jury sitting down to assess their presentation. So you want to make sure that, you know, whatever the format is, even with regards to the written or the media material, whatever the format is, ask if you don't know. Say, hey, you know what? When I submit the written material, that in addition to this, if I have posters, what should I do? Should I shrink the posters so that, you know, they're easily put into a package? Whatever. Ask, okay? And make sure that your support materials are going to be effective and that they represent you. They represent the best of you. Okay, now the writing of the grants, clarity is of extreme importance as well, clarity. People who sit on juries are not impressed by superfluous language where they have to try and figure out what's being said. So you have to be clear in your language, okay? This is not the time to do a creative writing exercise from the standpoint of using like flowery language, and it's not like that, okay? They want clarity. They want to be able to know exactly what you're applying for, what's the idea. You can find creative ways in terms of presenting the information, but make sure that the language is accessible, okay? Give all the information pertinent to the project. Talk about all the personnel that are going to be involved. You know, these are the things that they want to understand. Which facilities are you going to use? Do you already have, if it's a recording project, do you already have some, you know, relationships with some of the studios and which ones, and, you know, how would that work? You know, talk about other organizations that may be involved. So, you know, for example, as part of this process, I'm going to do 2 workshops with the Toronto Blues Society on this in order to get this information, and here's how I'm going to use that information when I eventually do my submission and so on. Talk about the organizations that are involved. Also, don't behave as though you've been ordained to create music and you won't have any challenges ever. No, identify the challenges that you think you're going to have in executing the project, and then talk about how you're going to mitigate those challenges, right? I live in this area and there are no studios here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin my process here. Then I'm going to go down to a studio in Toronto that I've already spoken to, and I'm going to do blah, blah, blah over there. So what happens is that when the jurors start to review these applications, they themselves are going to have some questions. The more that you can show that you understand the challenges and that you have come up with solutions to those challenges, the better. Gives you a better profile as someone who's on top of it, who they can say, yes, this is a good investment, okay? Outline the steps that are involved in the project with the greatest clarity. In other words, you know, first this, then this, then this, then this, and the timelines are, this is going to take 2 months, this is, you know, whatever, depending on the project, of course, right? But outline the steps with great clarity so people can see, yes, this person understands how to organize this project in a way that will make it executable, yeah? Do not contradict yourself within the application. Don't say this thing is going to be done by such and such a date at this time, and then somewhere else in the application give a different date for when that phase will be done. Or speak in the application, and this is a really common one, speak in the application and the narrative about how much recording time it's going to take to do this aspect of it, but then in the budget, allocate only half of that time for that line item in the budget. People who are looking at this project, when they see it, they say, well, wait a second, if they're going to spend that much time in the studio, why is it that in the budget, they've only allocated half of that cost, and so and so, unless you have an explanation. I'm getting some of it pro bono, or, you know, part of it I'm going to do in this way. They owe me studio time, and I'm going to use some of that, and so whatever, right? Seek clarification of questions in the application if necessary. So you're going through the application, you come upon something that you're not quite sure. It costs nothing, and it doesn't deter from your profile. If you call up the funder and say, look, I was looking at your application, and I'm a little bit concerned and confused here because I don't understand what this means. Please explain. That's their job. Use them. Also, remember what I was saying earlier, that most funders have an outcome that they, you know, a general outcome that they want to see for the funds that they hand out and so on. Often, a lot of it is centered around the impact on the community as a whole. So if you can have some idea about, as you move forward with your project, how it's going to impact the community. Could be the community of musicians, could be the community of artists, it could be the community of younger folk who are going to be inspired by what you do. It could be the community at large, that it will add to the vibrancy of the community that you live in, etc. Whatever it is, include the impact that you anticipate that your project will have. And you know, now the application may not ask for that. I'm telling you, these are the things that you can infuse, because they will always make a difference to the jurors who are looking at it. Okay, with regards to your budget, make sure that you are accurate. Go over the budget. If you're not someone who is, you know, really on top of that part of thing like financial statements and so on, get someone who can review it and for whom the discrepancies will show up very, very quickly. Get some folks to look at it. Try to make sure that your budget shows that you're accessing funds to do your project, if possible, from a diverse amount of revenue streams. Okay? Jurors like, and even sometimes if they're not directed that way, but jurors like to see that, yes, I'm applying for this project to, you know, this particular funder, but I've got a couple of other funders who are actually going to support this project as well. They love to see that. That broad base of support means a lot to them. It means that that you're not someone who's only relying on that particular funder alone, and that you've done your homework. You've looked, you've sourced out other folks who are willing to support this type of work and so on. Research a range of funders that will support your project. And for those folks who are applying for, you know, even like things like Canada Council, Ontario Arts Council, where, you know, it's outside of a single city, you know, like the Toronto Arts Council or something like that. If you're applying like that, it's really helpful to show that you have local support, right? If I live in, you know, Keelaloo, and I'm applying to the Ontario Arts Council or the Canada Council for something, and it comes down to a very close race between me and somebody else, I can tell you what happens. The jury, one of the things that they will consider is when they look and they see, oh, but they're also getting some local support from Kilaloo. That often will sway the jury to feel yes. If we don't allocate them necessarily all of what they ask for, but we give them some, we know that they have local support, they'll be able to complete the project, right? Whereas if you're telling them that the only support is the funding body that they're applying to, if they then start to feel if we're not able to give them all of the funds that they need for the project, then they won't do it because they have no other support, they have no local support. See what I mean? So it's very important to show and do your work, do your homework, get local support for your project, especially if you're applying at a provincial or federal level. Do not show surpluses on your budget. Revenues must equal expenditures. Think about it. The funder is not trying to give funds that you will, when you're done, you'll have some to put away in your account, right? They're giving funds, and the competition is usually very stiff. So they're giving funds that all of it will go to realizing the project. And so that's why you can't have surpluses at the end. So make sure that all your revenues equal the expenditures that you have. The budget has to be treated as an integral part of the project plan. And by that I mean, as you're going through the project plan in the first place, you're already thinking about the costs that are associated with it, okay? And so as you think about the costs that are associated with it, you're planning accordingly, right? You're planning accordingly. You're saying, okay, this is what we want to do at this phase. Let's look at what that would cost. That's a bit more money than I think we have going to be able to spend in that area. So now let me go back and look at what I'm planning and say, okay, is there a way that we could reduce what we are going to do in this phase so that we can reduce the budget? You go back and forth like that. The budget really, it could almost be called a budget plan. It is a part of the planning process for the project, not something you sit down afterwards and then throw some numbers at, okay? Research and get the actual cost of fees, materials, equipment, services, activities. Don't make it up and don't inflate the cost. The reason I say don't make it up and don't inflate the cost is because one way in which you could be shown up to be not credible is when people who sit there, remember, in a lot of cases, it's a jury of your peers. And so the people who are looking at it as jurors often are people who know this stuff really well, right? They've done the same thing themselves. And so if they look and they see an overinflated expenditures, right? You say it's going to cost me X amount of dollars to hire the musicians. And they're like, well, wait a second, that's not how it is. We know that you can have musicians for, here's what the Toronto Musicians Union, or even if it's non-unionized, here's what the general, revenue or the general cost for hiring musicians to do this and this and this and this. People know because they're in the business too, right? So once you show up with a budget that is overinflated, it starts to diminish their trust in the rest of what you're saying, right? So the idea is, I always say to people, it's not worth the risk to inflate the budget because somebody's going to catch it, okay? Categorize your budget areas and ensure that each line item is an eligible expense. So you're always looking at as you're planning, you're putting your budget together, look at every single line item and go back and make sure that that is a part of what the guidelines say are eligible expenses. Okay, I've seen folks go through their entire project, and then when you look at line items in the budget, it's like, well, it says here in the guidelines that that's not an eligible expense. Okay, all of these things can add up to make your application seem to be less credible than it deserves to be. When you're doing your reporting after the fact, right? The project's over. Most projects, often have a reporting process that comes after. Okay, and sometimes there might be a holdback, so there might be a bit of a portion, 10% or so, of the allocation that is held back until you complete the final report. It's just an incentive so that you do it, right? So when you're doing the final percentage report, even if it doesn't ask, if it exists, report changes in the revenue and expenditures. So for example, here's what we had budgeted, but you know what? We got this cheaper or this cost more, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of shifted those dollars a bit. Say that in the final report, right? And include notes if necessary that will clarify all of that. It serves to continue and build your brand as a credible artist who is financially competent and in control of your business. You know what's going on, right? There's justification for why you had to spend more on this. You were able to shift that around from here because you got this pro bono instead, so it gave you a little bit of flexibility. But report all of that in your final report. When you put together your budget, if there are elements of it, resources that you're going to be getting for free. In other words, my friend is going to do the poster design for me. If poster design is an eligible expense, you may not necessarily want to put that because you may want to use that room in the budget for something else. So then you'll say, the poster design or the album cover design is going to be donated. It's an in-kind donation, right? In-kind means that it's worth something, but I'm not paying for it. So it's given to me in kind. When you're done with your application, review it, get others who you trust to review it, because often, as I say here, 4 eyes are better than 2. Get others to review the completed application just to make sure that you're not missing anything. They've tried, I admit, to simplify applications a lot, and it's worked to some degree. But you know what? To a certain extent, because of the detailed information that the jury has to review, they could only be simplified so far, and still, and because they're not, they're not one-line applications, they're going to leave room for people to have errors. So get somebody to review it as well, somebody you trust. Some tips to improving your grant writing. Read successful grant applications. Even if you can't get online successful grant applications, if you have colleagues or whatever who said, look, I was able to be successful with this application that I submitted to blah, 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 ask them, can you redact all the personal information? In other words, blot out all the personal information, and I just want to read the flow of the grant. I want to read, so I have an understanding of what I start to build an idea in my head for the success factors, okay? 2, offer to sit on juries. Let the funding bodies that you're usually applying to, let them know you're available to sit on the juries. I learned more sitting on juries, which I've done a lot. I learned more sitting on juries about writing grants than I learned writing grants, okay? Because when you have, I don't know how they do it so much now. I haven't sat on a jury for a bit, but in the days when I sat on juries, I could have 300 applications for one program to review in detail, right? When you start to review that many applications, it gives you start to come out of it with a clear understanding of what makes successful applications, because then you see how the discussion plays out when the jury gets together, right? And what kinds of things make sense, what kinds of things, when they express that way, they end up being convoluted, what's clarity, etc., etc. You learn a lot by sitting on the jury duty. So my advice to people, you know what, offer to sit on juries, right? Because for every one of those that you do, you come away with a ton of information. Also, sometimes, you know, they will pay you a small fee or stipend in order to, you know, to compensate for some of your time. So it's not a bad situation. It's really a great thing to do. It's time consuming, no doubt, but you will learn a lot. Also, work on your skills at detailing budgets. Budgets are often a place where many artists drop the ball with regards to application. So work on it. Work on detailing budgets. Work on how to categorize your budget. You know, look at budget. Look at budgets. You know, online. Go look at budgets and say, hey, you know what? Why does this work for me? Does this tell a story? A budget, as I said, is a part of the plan, so it has to actually tell the story too. So how best can I do that? Work on your skills at detailing it. Practice being succinct. Word limitations are now common in most applications. People are like, look, you know, back in the day, I remember when there weren't that many word limitations on applications. You just, you know, you answered the questions however you chose, right? And some people felt at that time that, you know, the more they wrote is the more viable their application was. In fact, you know, I remember, you know, some folks would be, you know, they'd basically write down what they wanted to do, and then they would spend some time after that simply adding superfluous things to it in order so that it sounds like they're more credible because it's longer. Well, those days are gone. Right now, the people who are reviewing, the jurors, they don't want to read all night to understand what the essence of the application is. And so there are word limitations. So you have to practice how to be succinct. Practice how to write down all your ideas, etc., and say, okay, now let me put this into 60 words. Can I put it into a 75-word limit? Can I put it into a 50-word limit? And can I put it into a 25-word limit? Okay, so it takes some practice to do that. So practice it in advance so that when you come to do it on the application, it's not a struggle. Make sure that what is reflected in the narrative is reflected in the budget. And I talked about this a little bit before. When you're telling what you're going to do, et cetera, make sure that the budget reflects the same thing. Don't say, I'm going to spend an enormous amount of time in this phase, and then in your budget, have the cost allocated to that or the expenditure line allocated to that be not what it should be. So, you know, make sure that the narrative and the budget, that they match. Develop a clear statement on your competency in the area you're applying for. You know, if it's music creation or so, you know, what is your competency in that area? What are you really good at, and why do you think you would be considered as a prime candidate for this particular thing? If you can't sell your own self with regards to why you should be considered, you really have to practice at it. Because if you can't sell yourself, if you don't know that, then you can't tell the jury that. So make sure that you practice. You know, work on that statement. Work on it even when you're not in the process of grant writing, because the more you evolve that statement, the better you're going to be prepared for when you do want to apply. Also, learn to express your creativity in the application process. And I don't mean flowery language that takes up your word usage and so on. I'm talking about, you may come up with materials, support materials that are presented in a very creative way. Juries like to see that because it kind of gives them a sense of your style, of your flair, that the fact that you are creative and so on. Okay? Proofread your application for grammar, for spelling errors, for mistakes, and ask others to do that for you as well, so that you stand the best chance of having an application that is also read correctly in terms of the grammar, etc. Because all of those things, when I sit as a juror, because I understand that people are not always, for example, having English as a first language. We don't all have the same levels of practice with the English language and so on. As a juror, I tend to be very forgiving, but many other jurors are not, right? Many other jurors are not. So you want to give yourself the best possible opportunity, make sure there are no grammar, spelling errors, mistakes, and so on.
Quammie, can we take a pause?
You want to take a pause?
Oh, looks like you were about to invite the questions. Whom and I were just going to suggest that we open the floor up, so to speak. And I've posed a few questions, and there's a couple other comments that have transpired in the chat. So maybe Huma can help guide.
So let's go to that. That's kind of where we're at right now. I'm glad that we arrived at the same place at the same time. That's good.
The last one that I threw in, Quammie, was related to factor, and it's not so related to any of your key points, but it kind of speaks to the idea that you get somebody to help you overlook things and get advice, input from others. And I know that some people have put in factor applications, which is somewhat different from the arts councils, and you kind of need a detailed marketing plan. So my question is a suggestion on who to turn to for advice. How do you go about getting that put together? Because there's a template, and I've done factor juries, and you can see a repetition of sort of templates of, here's the checklist of, I'm going to advertise with campus radio, I'm going to hire a publicist, I'm going to, there's kind of a performa that happens, and you can get scored poorly if it isn't resonating for those evaluating.
Yeah, agreed. So the key, Derek, is, or for everybody actually, the key is this, right? What the juries should be looking at, because here's where the success factors are. What the jury should be looking at, the first step with regards to marketing is to show that you know your audience, that you know who your target is. Because marketing can look very differently depending on who you're targeting. So the first step is to make sure that you indicate a clear understanding of who your target is. Who do you perceive to be the audience, and for what reasons that you're trying to reach, right? And then what do you know about that audience, right? So for example, I'm just going to use blues as an example. So if I had a blues product, I'm going to say, right, I'm going to look at what that market for blues looks like who are the audiences that come out to these places. I might even describe them according to the age range that they fall within. And for example, as with blues, which kind of seems to rejuvenate every once in a while, there may be at the same time an audience that, are between the ages of 40 and 70. You may also have identify a young market that is now actually, starting to and you may have to market to those differently. So as I said, first thing is understanding and being able to articulate what that market is. Then talk about the avenues that you may use to reach those particular markets. And they, as I said, they may be different. You may be saying, you know what, for this particular segment of the blues market, all of my promotions are going to be online. I'm going to do this. I'm going to give away promotional, merchandise and so on online. I'm going to do this. It's going to be a whole online campaign. And then for some other people, it may be a little bit different. I may be saying, look, I'm going to communicate with these people by email, right? And I'm going to, so I'm saying the key is really, and this, to me anyway, if jurors are being fair, that's what they should be looking at. Are people able to identify their target? And then is what they're saying they're going to do to market to them, is it making sense with regards to the target they've identified?
Yeah,
You know
I don't know if anybody has any questions on this, but there's a range of people in the group, and for example, Susie Vinnick, who's here, is a beneficiary of a number of grants, and I work with Susie, so I know this specific area of the quality of your marketing is a thing, and marketing has changed so much in recent years. There was something that was kind of a boilerplate, and maybe I'll ask Susie if she could comment on this, because hiring a social media consultant, for example, or focusing on your YouTube hits. I mean, we've literally talked to people about improving Susie's YouTube profile. Susie, can you jump in and comment about your experience since you're a veteran here today?
A veteran and relearning again, I guess. I just recently applied for a factor juried sound recording and album, and I missed the boat by 1/4 of a point, and it was really positive feedback with regard to the music and that, but there were some things, and it may be, I think perhaps the jury is younger and because it was a sort of a blues focus, a bluesy album, that I think the audience tends to be older, so there's certain marketing things well, according to the jury, some of them thought that it was like too old-fashioned, like thinking of putting in publications and things like that. But they're with my market being a little older, those are things that still come into play, I think. But there's some things like with getting onto Spotify playlists, and I think and that sort of stuff where I don't have as much knowledge. So just trying to figure out ways to get that sort of thing rolling, and maybe find there's got to be young blues fans out there too, and trying to figure out how to engage them and ways to sort of try to make the application age span a bit more, and engage newer younger fans perhaps too.
I was researching a term today, Quammie, and it speaks directly to Susie's point: digitally native. And I saw this being referred to as a thing, and I went, what the heck is that? Is this something about the indigenous community? I didn't get it. So I looked it up, and digitally native, since we have somebody here who's under 20, Liam Doherty, who's joining us from BC, wearing his plaid shirt and red hair, I see. He's 14. He's digitally native. He's grown up with all the tools that Susie and I have not, and that's his norm. I mean, the idea of advertising in the Toronto Star or the Vancouver Sun, completely not in his vocabulary. Whereas his relationship with YouTube, and maybe we can ask Liam if he has any marketing comments, being of that generation, or if you've gotten to that stage with your record, which I happen to have right here.
Nice.
A nice little note from a sticky on the back. Liam, unmute yourself and comment about how your marketing was done for your record.
Well, I've got a mailing list, so I send out things like if I'm doing a show or if I got a live stream coming up, I can send it out to my mailing list.
How big is it?
Not as big as as it should be, but I'm still building it. But yeah, that's kind of one of my main ways of advertising. I also.
You mean email mailing list, right?
Yeah, email mailing.
As opposed to postal, because again, Susie and I grew up putting things in envelopes with.
Yeah.
And sending postcards. There was no internet. I used to make up a label and I had postcards made and stuck the mailing labels and the list of shows. I remember doing that with shows when Rick Fines and I toured across the country back in the 90s.
It's still a thing. How did you get your acquire your email addresses, Liam?
Well, on my website, if I can direct people from Facebook, Instagram, or my YouTube channel to my website, and they have an option to sign up for my mailing list. So if they go and say buy an album, or if they just look at my website anyway, they can sign up for my mailing list, and that's something I encourage on my website. And sometimes people will sign up for it, and then I can advertise any shows or live streams or anything along those lines to them.
Can I just say that kudos to you, Liam, because that having an email list is golden. I mean, MySpace was like a premier site. 14 years ago when you were just hatched, and now it's an obsolete site. So any sort of fan gathering you do on sites like Facebook and Twitter, it's so great to have those in your own possession, the list and that. Make sure you back it up to have a list as well. It's really great though. So I just wanted to say kudos to you. And hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah,
So I just want to,
go ahead.
Sorry, Derek. I just wanted to touch a little bit on Susie's point, because I think, Susie, what you experience is unfortunately going to happen quite a bit. So, and it always happens where there's a shift in paradigm. So some people are, you might be able to say, look, you know what, my market. These folks are not all online. Okay, the majority of them are still getting information in this way or in that way, and they're looking for this, right? So part of it is being able to articulate,
right,
that you understand the tools, even the new ones, and that a better way, I think, when you do this again, a better way is to say, look, I understand all the tools, so you're going to demonstrate that, and then you're going to say, however, because of the demography that I'm looking at, here's how I'm going to create my marketing mix, right? So this is the language, right? This is a marketing mix. It's not, I don't know about those other tools or I'm not considering them. It's that I have a different mix. So I may say, 80% of my resources are going to be allocated for this particular way of approaching them. And I'm only going to allocate 10% of my resources for an online presence. And you understand what I mean? So you have to talk about it from the perspective of a marketing mix and fluid use of all the tools, because what will happen is that as things go on, people will start to migrate. Okay? There are people migrating today. There are people today who normally would have been looking at one kind of marketing, who today sat down and said, you know what? I need to see what's on this computer. Like, you know what I mean? I need to understand better how this Facebook works and so on. And so that process of migrating is happening all the time. And so I think that when you apply, not to be untrue to how you know your market is, but to make sure that you indicate to the funder that you understand that there's a fluid mix going on and you understand where your people are in that mix.
Yeah, I think we did address that to a certain degree. I have a factor grant writer that's pretty savvy about that. I think where we're sort of where I may have missed in some of my contacts that I presented to her is even speaking to like getting somebody to help me out with social media, which I do myself, but there might be someone who's younger, maybe a little more savvy or knows some more of the tricks. I like, for example, I know that Facebook and Instagram have those stories, and I'm embarrassed to say I never use them because I don't quite understand them. And I think, why put energy into something that's going to disappear after a day, that sort of thing. So maybe like getting someone on board that is good with social media and even just things that someone younger might say, well, why don't you look at it this way, that I just might not see, being, as Derek says, a veteran.
No, good point. Good point. And it also goes to something that we talked about, because the last one we did last Sunday was really about how do you build your ecosystem? How do artists build around them the support that they need, right? So maybe you might go back and look at that from last week, but this is one of the key things, right? Is that we have to have a sense of what we're able to do ourselves, and then what we need, and then who's filling that gap, right? Some of those people we may hire, and we may hire them on a temporary basis. So some people we may look for a volunteer. We may look for somebody within family or friends or so who's looking themselves to gain an avenue into the music industry, who you might be able to provide them. You say, look, you know what? Work on my social media for me. You learn everything about, you learn what I know about music, and you will help me by being able to get me into the social media tools, right? So.
Yeah. Oh,
You're muted, Derek.
I'm muted, right. Curious if anybody on screen has a question and wants to jump in before we run out of time. Raise your hand. There's a chap there with a fine white beard, Bruce Barr. What's your question, Bruce?
Well, I have an elderly audience, I guess. Some of them are very adept at working their computers. Our problem out here is I'm in a rural area with limited Wi-Fi, I guess, or limited.
Where are you, Bruce?
Southwest of Montreal in Quebec.
Okay.
Chateauguay Valley. I host a Facebook show weekly. We get about I think I have 750 people that have joined our page, and I have about 1,500 that'll watch the show weekly. One of my questions is to Susie. I believe I should have had a YouTube page, I think, because if you have over 1,000 members, then you start collecting revenue there, right?
It's, I'm not even close to that, but it's 1,000 subscribers, and I think it's over 4,000 hours of viewing hours. So I have a friend that has the 1,000 subscribers, but they're only at 1,500 viewing hours. So that's the other place too, that you have to up those numbers, and then you can, if there's some sort of way to monetize. Somebody like JP Cormier, I think, is well along there, and I'd have to peek and see whom else, but.
We've done sessions around YouTube views through one of the young musicians emerging, Gavin MacLeod, who had a lot of revenue from YouTube because not from music initially. He was involved in the skater world, and it was actually something that I still don't understand, mini skateboard, and he had over 100,000 viewers, and
Yes.
He's been trying to migrate them, to use the word Quammie used a minute ago, over to his music career, and he's posting a lot, and he's done panels for us on his process of developing his music career. He's literally studying business at Ryerson now too, as long as Ryerson is still a school. Yeah, I think any kind of digital upgrade, Bruce, would be useful, and maybe even maybe we'll do a session. Well, you would actually benefit from the session that we're developing with Guillermo Sauste next month,
Okay.
because he's talking about how to do live streams and some aspect of audience development and improving your reach will show up in that those sessions.
Liam, did you have anything you could add to that too?
No, I just actually had a question
Go ahead.
as to how much emphasis does the jury for grants and funding, how much emphasis do they have on how many Spotify streams you have? Is it a very major role in whether you get the funding or not?
Well, I think that it depends on the type of granting that it is, right? So, for example, if like Factor will put a lot more emphasis on that because, you know, they're truly looking at commercial opportunity, whereas, you know, arts councils and so on are not necessarily looking at that. They want to see that you understand it and that you know and aware of the ability to use it, the abilities that it can bring if you use it and so on. So I think it's a slightly different, you know, I haven't heard of any arts council juries that are detracting so much from folks, whether or not they're using streaming tools and so on. Not yet.
There's even a backlash in some circles on Spotify, dare I say. I have an anti-Spotify post on my Facebook wall that explains some of the injustice of royalty stream revenue that a lot of us are talking about, and the correction for that and directing people to Bandcamp, which is more favorable. Where your question is really relevant, Liam, is with talent buyers. Many of them are looking for your audience build at YouTube and any other digital platform to determine how big your audience is. It isn't a deal breaker. It is an influencer. You know, somebody will, in my peers will say, look at this person, they've got 10,000 viewers or 100,000 viewers, and it's kind of gives you an alert. But after that, it comes back to the quality of the music and all the other factors. So, you know, I think Spotify, you know, it can't hurt, but I think your first point on your audience development through your mailing list, if you can say you've got 5,000 addresses that you're reaching out to in your young career, that would be a good thing.
Okay.
What other areas besides Factor and Arts Council can you actually put grants in for?
SOCAN. SOCAN Foundation has a program that is kind of specific, and Quammie, I don't know if you want to comment on it, because it's something that is fed to presenters and to artists, and it's usually something kind of specific like touring.
It was originally conceived. It was originally conceived to try and support the dissemination of, you know, artist music, but that would be supported by things like touring and things like that. So I think I'm not so sure the full scope of SOCAN's or like what their investment is meant to bring, but I know touring is a part of it. I also know that they also have some grants for actual marketing. What else is there, Derek?
Well,
there's touring,
just
marketing.
It's SOCAN Foundation as opposed to the sort of front door main operation. Susie, have you ever had success with SOCAN Foundation for your work?
I've gotten money from SOCAN Foundation for going to showcases. Nothing creative, but I think perhaps their creative has been more classical music oriented, if I'm not mistaken. So,
Kathy, where are you living? That might actually help us with a better, more refined answer. What part
Barrie, Ontario.
Northern?
Barrie, Ontario.
Right. Well, Quammie would know. Barrie, Ontario, pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm up in that area as well. I am actually in Ulawell. But I'm just actually pulling up the SOCAN Foundation now. But if you go to their website, you know, they will lay out some of their programs. They have, you know, their grant programs, and you can actually see what it is. But that's a good way to go. And the other thing too is that
I was going to refer to some other municipalities, Quammie, that, and I don't know about Barrie supporting artists directly, but the reason.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Barrie does have a granting program as well.
Are you talking through the city, eh? Or are you talking
Sorry, say that-
through the music organization that they just started, one of the artists had put together? I think it's OMIC or something like that.
Yes, right. So there's Derek. That is the same organization with Valerie.
Valerie, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. But their focus right now isn't so much. It's they're focused on artist training. So they're focused on artists at the stage of development specifically.
Okay.
But the city of Barrie actually has a granting program. And the granting program at the city of Barrie, it's not as robust, let's say, as, you know, one of the Toronto Arts Council or Ontario Arts Council like that. But it does have a granting program that tries to serve the needs of artists in that community.
Depending on the
Okay.
size of the city, I would suggest that's become a thing in recent years. There's even a concept at Music Canada called Music Cities, and how influential music is for the well-being and the culture of a city. So London, Hamilton, Kitchener, various cities have developed music programs not dissimilar to what we just talked about with Barrie. And that did not exist 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, but people will do it more than more. I mean, you know, the arts, the program to support artists in Barrie was actually founded by myself in my stint as a director at the city of the Department of Culture.
Yep.
You know, so it's about, let's say we started that. Yeah, so it's about. Yeah, it's over 10 years old already, right? Because I think we started that back in 2009, and I know they're still doing it, because I recently saw the allocations, the awardees, and so on. I saw the list. So I mean, that's also a good place to apply to, and you know, municipalities more and more are going to start doing that as people begin to find better and better ways to support the people who are creating vibrancy in their own community. So it's always a good idea to kind of keep abreast, you know, of what's going on, because, you know, often they will spring up. Like I know Aurelia also, I think, is having some small movement in that direction with regards to funding artists as well.
I worked in Guelph.
Sorry, Liam has his hand up, but did you have any more questions, Liam? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, actually for Factor Canada, they require 2 demos for, you know, to apply for funding. How polished do those demos have to be?
So which Factor program are you applying for?
I'm just in general.
Right. So it sounds as though you're probably talking about the recording programs, and if you do, then they're not expecting a polished demo. They want to hear the quality of the song itself, right? Because the idea is that they're going to, if you're successful, they will fund you to actually turn it into a quality recording. So what they're interested in is, can they hear the song well? Can they hear the melody? Can they hear the lyrics? The accompaniment could be minor in terms of, it not being heavily layered or anything like that, but something that will give them a good feel and a good understanding for the song itself, right? Because that's the first step is it a strong song?
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
Thanks.
I can just underline. There was like a good tip from Susie earlier in the chat that she said it's if you have written your grant application in good time, you may be able to have the grant officer review your application and offer some feedback.
Yeah.
Okay.
Derek actually asked the question, which
Yeah.
you might.
So that is true. Yeah. Yeah. And thanks for putting Christy's name in there, Derek, and her contact. Christy's actually really, really good. Like, we're very fortunate to have somebody like that at the Toronto Arts Council, because I've met her personally. In fact, at one point I tried to steal her from the Arts Council to come to Barrie, but she's really, really good, very, very supportive, and with somebody like that, you could definitely, contact her and say, look, can you provide some more information? If like what they won't do, and they can't do because of conflict of interest, is they can't take your grant and review it and then tell you what to do in order to make it better. You see what I'm saying? They can't do that because that would be a conflict of interest, right? Because they're not able to do that for every single person. But what they can do is answer all your questions for clarification, right? So the people who I would say that if you have all the clarification and you've done your application and everything and you need somebody to review it, it's not the staff at the Arts Council, for example. It is someone else. It is, perhaps, I don't want to put the Blue Society on the spot, but, maybe it's talking to the Blue Society and them being able to put you in touch with someone who is competent, who can help to review it for you, and so on. So if you don't have someone close by, right? But the job of the Toronto Arts Council staff wouldn't be to review your application and tell you what to do, because they can't take, the liability is too high. They can't take responsibility for that. Because what if somebody comes back after and says, well, I should have gotten this grant because she told me that this is what was wrong, right? So they can't do that for that reason. But what they will do, though, they'll go as far as they can to make sure they answer all your questions, to make sure you have a clear understanding, and so on. So, but get a friend, get a colleague, get someone else in the business who has experience to review it. You simply need to have a couple of eyes on it so that they'll be able to point things out if they have some experience.
Can I please ask Liam, what was that council that you were just saying you were applying to just before this other topic came up?
I was applying to Factor Canada.
Oh, it's Factor. Okay, I know about Factor. I thought it was something else that I didn't hear about. Thank you.
There I am. I just posted in the chat because Susie's grant writer is in BC. Is she on one of the islands, Susie? I can't remember exactly. Joni Daniels. I just shared her email address, a veteran grant writer, and her company Tree Fort Artists is. She used to work at Much Music and leans to the Factor Grant School as opposed to the Arts Councils, I would say.
Yeah, that's her sole focus. She has a roster of people she writes for, and you have to, like, she's specific about who she writes with, but she might be worth reaching out to. Liam, I was just thinking of you because you guys are both on the coast.
What island is she on?
She's on Denman. Sorry, I meant to answer that. But she's great. She's been doing this for a long time, and of course we were frustrated this last application because we were so close, but she may have recommendations too. And and I noticed through like Music managers forum, and that there's the Factor sometimes will even have webinars like this that are specific to their different programs, and that you can check out and get tips and even make some connections as well, Liam, so that, and anyone else who's interested in the Factor grant path. And I think there's album, like juried sound recordings. There's also, I think, some songwriting and artist development as well. So when you were asking about quality of songs for recordings, I think it is important, like for an album, you don't want to hand in something you record on a voice memo demo, I think on your phone. I think you want to try to have it as good a quality as you can, but you often suggest that you're going to add things to the recording. You know, you might get somebody come in and do backup vocals and that if you don't have it, but there's a development program as well too. So anyway, if you have questions about Joni, feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks.
You bet.
I just asked Huma a question and she answered, I think she shook her head, that we don't have a list that we share, but there's a handful of people that I know who are grant writers. Sebastian Cook is one. This is a topic that comes up at Maple Post, the discussion group that the folk community has, and if somebody will post, you know, can somebody recommend a grant writer, and there's usually a half a dozen suggestions. So that's there's the MMF.
Is Carrie still around, Derek? I think Carrie worked with you at Harborfront before. Carrie, oh shoot, she's an excellent grant writer. If she's still in the Toronto area, she's definitely someone who can help people out.
Well, one of our board members, Jordan Safer, is an excellent grant writer also, but he's full-time at Harborfront. Which Carrie are you talking about?
Carrie,
one was
I
involved
think
in
she went
theater?
to, sorry, what's her name?
He was involved in theater?
Yeah, she went to work for the city of Toronto at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Carrie McDonald.
Thank you.
McDonald, right.
Yeah, Carrie McDonald.
She is an excellent grant writer. If you're looking for somebody who might even come in and like do a workshop or something like that, I would highly recommend her. She's an excellent grant writer.
Huma, that's a suggestion we can follow up on later. I just put her email address into the chat for you, Huma, and the Michael Herring suggestion that Susie just shared. That's the husband of Rebecca Hennessy, and is a bass player. But you're right, Susie. He's been a recommended grant writer. We might go into this in a little more detail. We've taken Quammie's time up today to do this session, and I'm not sure how much more time. Phil has his hand up and has a question. So let's grab that, Phil, if you want to, you're unmuted, jump in.
Right. Well, we don't have really questions here. I've written grants before for business and stuff like that. I'm a traditional a native singer, and I'm also playing a band. And Susie, it's nice to meet you. Finally, I've seen you perform. I'm down here in Niagara as well, too. Seen you perform more than a few times. I have a band called Old Child, and we play around here, but I want to start moving us forward. I have been kind of on the outskirts of looking at grants and stuff, but this is a good refresher to get my brain kick-started in, and I'm looking forward to next week to absorbing some more information. Now, unfortunately, I have to run right now, but thank you all for sharing your knowledge base. It's been real awesome and great questions and everything, and have a great day. Stay positive, test negative.
Thanks, Bill. If you're First Nations, we on our website there's actually a job posting that Mizuwabik is supporting.
Oh yeah.
And if you could spread the word in your part of the province.
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to send that link forward? I can forward it on to our Native Center.
I'm just putting in the chat right now.
All right.
Make which, Phil?
Yo. Okay, everybody, have a great day.
You too.
You
Thank
too,
you.
Phil.
Play on.
Mark, I noticed Sepik is on there. Mark, can you share anything with us in terms of your?
Quammie, hi everybody. Sorry, I'm just trying to drive safely and responsibly. Of course, I've only been partaking and appreciating everyone through the audio medium. I've got my phone, as you can see, in my face with my shades. I'm going to turn off my video now and put it down. But what I just want to say is thank you, everyone, and especially Quammie. It's been delightful to get reacquainted after our youthful history at York University and the bamboo and whatnot. And
absolutely,
I just want to wish everyone well and well-being inside and out and collectively and individually. And I'm just so grateful to be with you all.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark.
And I just thought very briefly I would share that lately I've been getting more involved in instrument design and community arts with my I've got an ecological music recycling project which I call the Junkestra, and it's grown to 12 installations across the province and various portables that I bring to festivals. But now that the festivals won't be happening in person, incarnate, with people using mallets and then passing them on to the next person to use mallets, just things like once things start again, I'll have to be budgeting mallets that everyone can keep, just like your chopsticks when you order Japanese takeout.
Okay.
So yeah, anyway, just stuff like that. I'm just trying to reframe everything to be, health conscious and physically friendly in our new world as it, starts again in person. And in the meantime, if you see any jazzy junk around, chances are that it will have my hand in it. And I'm looking for more ways to do that safely in our new age.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. No, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Quammie, and everyone.
So, are there any other questions or anything that folks would like to make sure that we address before I jump off here?
Just wanted to say hi. and it's been a great workshop and really nice to meet you and hear you, Quammie. You've got a lot of wisdom there. So I look forward to checking out the first couple of workshops, and thank you for all that you've passed on to us here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susie. It's definitely my pleasure. And I also want to thank Derek and Humma for for providing the forum where this can occur. That's a significant thing. And I think that we really have to dialogue more and more and more, because we have to transfer information a lot more rapidly. So yeah, I look forward to speaking with you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining, everyone. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday, 2 p.m. for the last session.
Yeah.
Things up.
Quammie, do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so for the last section, what we're going to tackle is this whole idea of artist as entrepreneur. And so we'll talk a little bit about things like, truly building an artist brand, looking at opportunities to market. So some of the same discussion we had today, but more from the point of view of how does an artist actually view themselves as a business, or view something that they're doing. How do they really create a business out of what they know, right? And then what are some of the principles that we need to observe with regards to being successful as entrepreneurs, right? So you'll hear some of the same themes come up, but this is looking at it particularly from the perspective of entrepreneurship. Okay, an artist as an entrepreneur, art as an entrepreneurial activity. That's what we'll talk about.
Tell your friends. We'll be back here next Monday.
Okay.
Go Leafs, go.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, be blessed, everyone.
Thank you.